Faba beans play a crucial role in farming systems in many regions around Australia. With their ability to fix atmospheric nitrogen, Faba beans contribute to improving soil fertility and reducing reliance on synthetic fertilisers. These versatile legumes are well suited to diverse cropping rotations, providing an effective break that helps manage weeds, disease, and pest pressures of other crops. As well as the advantages they bring to our farming systems, growers also have the potential to capitalise on favourable market conditions. Farmers who apply good agronomic knowledge and practices to increase yields maximise profits of Faba beans in years like 2019, when prices were very high. Building a strong understanding of Faba bean production, including variety selection, disease and pest management, and optimum nutrition strategies, will see strong agronomic and economic benefits. It's important to acknowledge that growing Faba beans still presents challenges and uncertainties. Factors such as changing weather and climate, disease outbreaks and market dynamics introduce unknowns into the equation. Therefore, continued research is crucial to further enhance agronomic practices and unlocking the full potential of Faba beans as a profitable and sustainable crop in Australia. Welcome to the first episode of Farmers Pharmacy, brought to you by Far Australia, a seasonal series of episodes where we prescribe the perfect dose of ag research. With me today, I've got Aaron Vague.
Morning.
Which I don't know if it's official or unofficial, but you're certainly the champion of our pulse site down here in Victoria.
It's a burden I'm willing to bear.
So Aaron, we've run some disease trials over the last couple of years at our Narwarri site. So just for a bit of context, the site that we've been running is in the southwest high rainfall zone of Victoria. And we've looked at a number of disease trials over the last couple of years. And you've got the results in front of you there. What did we find out?
Yeah, so just as a caveat to suggesting that we have all the answers, that's never the case. I mean, the point of doing research is to progress in the right direction, and if anybody tells you they've fixed the issue, they're probably telling fibs to a lesser extent. I mean, there are certain things in terms of numerical problems. If you're targeting weeds, let's say, well then that's just a numbers game, and if you get that down to zero, then you've solved a problem to a certain extent. Whereas disease management is a constant moving target, and we've felt the full brunt of that over the last few years. But this, just to give a snapshot of 2 years, so in 2021 in southwest Victoria, we set a new bar. So we hit over the 7 tonnes per hectare in beans, and all of a sudden we thought, here we go, we're off here. We've got a true cash crop, and 7 tonnes has become quite the profitable enterprise.
Yeah. So anything less the next year, we were going to fire someone, were we? Or
it kind of ruined my graph of saying that, this is where we've come from and this is where we're going. The sky was the limit, and all of a sudden the ground became the reality. So we created a trial to set up different varieties. So in this trial we've got 2 varieties, Bendoc and Amberley.
So
Amberley being, I think it's a MR in terms of chocolate spot, and Bendoc being a susceptible or MS variety. I mean, those ratings always change, but let's just call Amberley the resistant one and Bendoc the susceptible one.
But in theory, Amberley is probably one of our few options of genetic resistance in Faba beans,
exactly,
especially around chocolate spot.
Yeah,
right?
So if you're growing in a region where you're going to get disease, and for us in the southwest running this trial site, that's us. You can put our hand up for that one. So in terms of putting your best foot forward, if you can afford new genetics, well, buy yourself a few tonne of Amberley and get going in that direction, rather than harbouring a variety that is still profitable in certain circumstances, but in terms of a numbers game and risk management, it's less likely that Bendoc's going to give you the desired outcome in terms of the disease space. So yeah, 2 varieties, and then we're going to talk, for the sake of simplicity, in fungicide units. So everywhere from an untreated up to a 1, 2, 3 and a 4 in-crop conventional fungicides. And I guess conventional, we're talking about your upfront being a tebuconazole, and then maybe a mancozeb at a canopy closure, and then every 2 weeks after that with carbendazim, chlorothalonil, until the end of flowering. So to protect the plant during that critical period where yields being defined. And then to move on from that conventional approach and the number of fungicides, then we've got the introduction of new SDHI technology, which is effectively like a double whammy, or at least that's what the data's been suggesting. So yeah, 2021, great year.
So mainly chocolate spot, and 2021 was kind of that first year we were seeing a lot of rust coming to the site. There might have been a little bit in 2020, but 2021 was really when you started to notice it a fair bit.
Yeah, that's it. Like chocolate spot was the disease that was prevalent at flowering and during the spring, and so the disease that was going to be the greatest, have the greatest effect on yield. And as you say, rust did appear later, but less so in terms of a yield defining factor. So in 2021 we had an untreated of 4.4 tonnes per hectare, which I would have taken that last year if you gave me the opportunity, but in 2022, but unfortunately we didn't have that year. And then highest yield went all the way up to the 4 fungicide conventional approach at 7.1 tonne. But the interesting fact with that, there was no statistical difference between that 4 fungicide approach and the 2 fungicide with an SDHI in it, in this case Morava Star followed by Veritas, and that was put on 14 days after first flower. So it just shows the ability of that of the approach of using expensive fungicides to really make up the difference between being able to get on the paddock in a regular interval, particularly in our conditions. Absolutely. Where it rains and it's wet. So yeah, it's nice to have options up our sleeve.
Yeah, that's quite impressive.
Yeah, but I guess the point with that is it's not to go away and say go your hardest with these expensive fungicides. Like there probably is a return on investment for putting in multiple of them, but if we want to keep growing profitable beans into the future, then we got to protect our options that have become available to us. If we get into a situation where we're always using our trump card, the diseases tend to learn those patterns, and then we potentially get fungicide resistance, and then we're back to square one with failure beans, unfortunately. So
yeah. But yeah, weighing up all those factors about the variety that you're growing, whether it be like an Ambly type one or a Bendoc, in terms of resistance, and then I guess by that stage you've probably got a pretty good outlook of the season. So you know if it's going to stay wet or if it's an El Nino and it's going to dry up a bit, and you're going to have a bit less disease pressure.
Yeah, I think it's this historical expectation of going to the utmost management to keep beans alive. But I guess that and so people go ahead with the approach, the strategy that's been set out at the start of the year. They'll have their list of recos, and depending on whether there's no disease or a lot of disease, they'll go out and spray that recommendation that they've been given. And that's not such a bad thing, but what we're trying to say is that I guess with an integrated disease management approach of being selective with your varieties, and then reading the indicators throughout the season, that you do have potentially options of using less fungicide under the right circumstances. But I think the problem with that is like everyone, crystal ball, Aaron, like is it going to be a wet season? And you know, currently they're suggesting an El Nino, which I think would be nice, but as suggested earlier, we're out there hand booming in early July because of lack of trafficability. So what we really need is a greater understanding of the difference between the indicators that we're getting and the ability to make decisions based on on those conditions that we're presented with. So moving on to leaving 2021 behind us and moving into 2022, if those can remember or they've blanked it out of their memory, it got pretty wet towards the end of the season, and as stated with those rules of thumb, like if you have humidity and temperature, then you get a lot of disease. And using the same trial design as what I've just gone over with Bendoc Ambly. Yeah. A resistant and susceptible variety, and then overlaying those different fungicide management strategies, you got a vastly different outcome in 2022 than we did in 2021. So untreated, as you'd expect, 1.2 tonne, nothing to write home about.
But already pretty, sort of showing that the yield potential was a lot lower than that 4 tonnes we had the previous year.
Yeah, exactly. And like there's a number of factors. Like I'm not blaming poor old disease as the only thing that caused that. Like I don't know about you, but I don't like standing out in the rain with wet feet for 2 months, and neither did the plants. So we had the expected outcome from such a wet season, not just with beans, but with every crop type. And it was a hard year to make money, that's for sure. And one thing we saw in 2021 was that we kind of reached that peak curve, like that point of diminishing returns. And so we kind of knew, that year we could have put on 2 fungicides or 3 fungicides and got the same as 4.
Yep.
Whereas in 2022 we really didn't achieve that point of diminishing returns. It seemed like there wasn't. You could have put on 10 fungicides and probably made a comeback, but that's just not the conditions we were presented with. So our best go at highest yield potential was with a 4 fungicide approach with 1 SDHI integrated into that, which was Morava Star, and that achieved 3 tonnes per hectare, and that was actually statistically different than every other treatment that we put forward. So a 2 fungicide SDHI approach, so like 1 SDHI in that, and then say a Veritas to follow up in late flowering, and even a 4 fungicide conventional approach. They just didn't achieve the same yields as we saw with an SDHI, so they yielded about half a tonne less.
And the trends that we were sort of seeing between those step-ups in fungicides was pretty even across even both those varieties. So even the Ambly, which is in theory more resistant to disease, it was still seeing the benefit from the increased fungicides.
Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying, like that genetic resistance that we have in our cereal options, particularly in the high rainfall zone where we can import European genetics to save ourselves a bit of time in terms of domestic development. We just don't have that with faba beans, and so our most resistant variety, as you say, Ambly, still doesn't make the cut in a year like that. But it's not to say that give up all hope and go for something else, because it's still out-yielded Bendoc, but a variety like Bendoc, non-statistically still yielded, I think it's about 10% less in this frame. So you do the maths. If you have a good variety in your farming system, then it probably pays for itself in a few years.
Yeah, and if it's not such an extreme year like the last couple of years in terms of disease, it probably does give you more flexibility with your fungicide management to be able to take your foot off the accelerator a bit earlier if the season sort of cuts out. Yeah,
that's right. And the difference is we'd like those indicators to tell us what we can and can't do, or what we should do at what time. So I guess it's about risk management and setting yourself up for whatever the outcome. And if that's the case, you go for a resistant variety versus a susceptible variety.
And that's all we got time for today. So if you'd like to get in touch, you can reach us on our Twitter, which is @far_Australia. Or you can also reach us on our other socials. I think we're on Facebook, Instagram, SoundCloud, YouTube. I don't think we're on TikTok yet, but if people use that, we'll jump on it. Please remember to like and subscribe to this episode, or to our channel and this episode, for all the latest content you'll see and hear from us soon.